Hello, good evening, everyone. We are right on top of 7 o'clock tonight. It's so weird to not say 8 o'clock or number of minutes after 8 o'clock on the East Coast of the USA. But hey, we're an hour earlier than we usually do for our sports talk and a lot of our normal shows. But hey, let's get right into it tonight. Tonight's a special where we talk about some issues related to not just sports, college sports, but really taking a look at the business side of the college sports and its effect on the game, recruiting, and things like that in the what used to be amateur athleticism, as we will probably explore, kick the tires on. But hey, who better than to talk about any business type of issues anywhere in the world of any type of thing? It's the man on YouTube that knows the most of everything else. Probably one of the most brilliant minds we've seen that's exposed to so many different things. He's right here. It's the Great Culture Casino. Howdy, sir.
Who?
You.
Oh, you were talking about somebody smart. I was thinking, well, we got Valiant coming on here, or
No. Oh man,
Mexican Iron Man, or
we used to have a joke around our office with the accountants and all. Some of our people were so reading in the statutes and all that they're like the best lawyers that practice law without a license. But I'd say you're not trying to practice law, but you've got a wealth of knowledge about a lot of things. And how do you keep up with so much news and especially with it being so diverse?
I read everything. It's funny because I wake up in the morning and the first thing I'm doing is I'm reading, and then I'm listening to podcasts often in the car, and especially on things that interest me and probably nobody else. I have a lot of useless knowledge trapped up here, but no, for the most part, it's just reading I'm reading the things that interest me. And right now, entertainment is very interesting from a business perspective. It has been now for 10, 15 years. So it was, and then, you get to know people, you have, relationships with people for many, many, well, years or decades even. And, they work in industries that interest you. And so I pay attention. I ask questions, and I do a lot of reading each and every
Mm-hmm.
day. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Read, and ask
Yeah.
questions. See, I'm in the auditing business, so we ask questions, and my wife. Although the problem is, it kind of bothers Mrs. Dadman Walking sometimes when I ask too many questions. It's like, hey, you're not at work anymore. So, but hey, gotta keep the boss happy. So
Oh, I know.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, you've got
Yeah.
a nice culture boss over there. Please say hi to her from
Oh,
us. We definitely,
I'm sure if she's not listening already, she will be shortly. So there you
absolutely,
go. But yeah, no, I mean,
absolutely.
looks like we got a pretty decent crowd
We got to
walking in the door. Yeah.
exactly. We do. Well, let me say some quick highs before we hit our
Oh,
first topic for the night. We got the great bear himself, Snortopoopas Kubur, who's already talking about it's dark already. And hello, humans and other critters. Great to see you tonight, Snortopoopas. Always, I always like to say I hit the big time when I knew he started following me. So it's like he's everywhere. Good to see you, polar bear. Corey Cochran, good again. Hey, good to see you again. Hell to you. And the pre-mentioned Mrs. Dadman walking here, saying hello to everybody. Hello. We got our friend, the great Admiral Teague out here. Hello to you, Admiral. Um, Snort Pooper said that means an hour earlier from Betty by time. Speaking of auditors, hey, Yemi, how are you tonight? Good to see you, my friend. Um, and Snort Pooper says the man, the beard, the legend. Definitely not me. So, and yes, adult life. Yes, exactly. So, okay, this that's a technique of auditing. We wear you down to get the answer we want, right? Okay. Yemi, take notes. So, hey, and let's say hello to Small Time Republic, one of our great, he's like the Shea Ziegler shirt. Oh, is that what? Okay. Oh
yeah.
my gosh. I didn't, I was about to ask who the person is because I've seen the Shea shirts, but
Yeah,
interesting.
this is Rachel Ziegler, and it's a parody shirt. People ask me, they're like, "Wait a minute, that doesn't sound very much like your politics." No, it's not. This is a joke.
I know
Mhm.
it's very eye catching. It really gets your
Yeah.
attention. And Small Town Republic is one of our great Auburn fans. So, sorry about this week, though, my friend, uh,
Yeah.
who will be with me on my conference special next week. So, hey,
Ooh.
good to see you. Yeah, we're going to take a look at all the conferences. I'm going to have people splitting up the conferences. So, uh,
Ugh.
too much, so many different
Yeah.
things to do. So,
Yeah.
and just another red shirt. Hell, red shirt. Good to see you tonight. Good to see you, sir. And all right. So here we go. We've got 10 people watching already. We've got one on the let's see, we got a couple people on the Twitch side, 8 on the YouTube side. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't. Uh, thank you for everybody's support so far to getting over 500. Where it says 511, we're now at 513. But thank you to great people like Culture Casino and my guest tomorrow night, Lorena Creole, for shouting out. But most of all, thanks to you great people in the chat coming to these shows and hanging with me at all hours of the day. Couldn't have done it without all you guys and ladies out there. So just make sure to get your notifications, and we'll tell you about the Twitter in a little bit later. So, all right, Culture Casino. Shall we get started?
Sounds good.
All right. Where I want to start with this, the purpose of the show tonight is really to talk about, like we said, like the thumbnail said, we're going to look not at sports ball itself, the games, how it's played. We're going to look at some of the business side, some of the issues, some of the news stories that have come out. One of the things that a lot of people comment on a lot these days is the coaching salaries and the cost. How much money is involved in college sports. But even more touchy is when a coach is fired.
Yeah.
Recently, Jimbo Fisher was fired by Texas A&M after having a contract extension, because theoretically what had happened was it was a 10-year contract. So when he had a good year, then they kept expanding it 10 years the last time. But after being fired, he is technically owed about $76 million through the remainder of the contract. And I looked to make sure, and that's whether he takes a job or not.
Yep.
So, it's just, any thoughts on that about how these contracts work? I mean, from a personal standpoint or just, from a business standpoint, because you've got to, you write a contract, you have to enter it. You have to, honor it.
Yeah.
Just the sheer sums of money are just amazing. $76 million for this. According to the contract, A&M will owe Fisher $19.2 million within 60 days, and another 7.2 annually through 2031. So apparently they did a careful analysis and decided they needed a new coach, but then come up with a sizable paycheck like that. This is one of the, and it's not just this case. There's many other coaches that have been fired like this in these buyouts.
This has happened for the better part of the last 30 years, actually. It's just now the contracts are written and they're very sophisticated. They include accelerated clauses like, everything becomes due upon termination. And now with Fisher's contract, you're seeing just the accelerator have a kicker, which means he can take another job tomorrow. He can take another job, a day after he's fired. It doesn't really matter. It's just, and there are bigger fish to fry here that I don't think people see. Not only these contracts going up and up and up, but they also are driven by the boosters primarily. They're not driven at the university level, although everybody wants to have the best coach they can. It's not driven by state money, which we're going to talk about here in a few moments. And believe me, Dadman knows a bunch of what's going on there in Florida, but it's driven by the boosters, the people on the outside, the alumni associations, especially those that were involved in the sports programs. And these people have a lot of money, and they are more than happy to waste that money, get it moving on to the next best thing. And I think that speaks volumes to kind of where we're at in sports. And that's entirely about what today's conversation is, starting with this subject first and moving forward. Right now, there's too much money in sports, especially, in the administrative side with the coaching and everything else. And then on the player side, which we are also going to do today. But I feel like, the Fisher one might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and we might start to see a little bit more restraint going forward, because you cannot afford to write these guys $100 million check and they walk out the door and they go collect another $100 million for somebody else, for 10 years. You just can't afford that.
No, It's a written contract. You can't prosecute a written contract the way it is. It's two parties enter into it willingly and agreeing. At what point does the payer side finally say, a buyout's one thing, but what's a reasonable buyout? Like in this case, paying somebody that whether you want to fire them or not, it's difficult enough. There's been recent challenges of a couple of schools where the university have been challenged successfully when they tried to fire people with cause. So it's easy to say, well, we can fire them with cause, but still, when the lawyers get involved, when it goes to court, it's not always clear cut with that. And like you said, with the money involved, especially like in a case like Texas A&M, you got to look at the history of it. And like you said, the boosters with things. This is not the first time. I mean, they fired Kevin Sumlin before Jimbo came in, which Sumlin's buyout was another about $10 million. I'm looking at my, let's see. Kevin Sumlin, who was the head coach of Texas A&M before him, had about a $10 million buyout. So we're talking about a $10 million buyout back in about 2017. Now, 6 years later, you're facing a $76 million buyout.
Yeah.
And also you also have to look at when Jimbo left FSU, they also had to, there was a buyout related to that, because his was smaller there, is about $5.5 million because it was basically the sum of the remaining contract of his assistants that were not retained. So, all these dollars throw together. It's easy to look at this one headline, but when you look at the story from beginning to end, there's a lot more money that's involved just to get rid of a coach. And it's like it's almost becoming like monopoly money, and where's the accountability?
Well, there isn't any, and again, I mean, it comes down. I'm going to keep saying it. It's all on these boosters. Nobody in their right mind, outside of these boosters who may have operate their own company or may have contributed to the creation of a large corporation or whatever. Nobody but them would look at this money and say these guys are CEOs. Well, in a certain sense, maybe they are. But they're not CEOs year round, and they are not worth these. And oftentimes they make more than CEOs do in major corporations. Yes, this is a very specialized field, but any single corporation is a specialized business because it has its own intricacies. It has its own institutional inner workings that make it function. They have their own culture. Well, all of these football programs certainly have all these things, but they're not worth the kinds of money. I mean, you hear about like the Sam Altman got fired from OpenAI, Chat GPT the other day, right? Well, he had a job in 48 hours. I doubt he had a whole lot of buyout. I'm sure there was a little bit of money they had to get rid of him with, but it's nothing like what these football guys are. And you're talking about entities that are in charge of, hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, look at Iger over at Disney, right? Or look at these guys that, are making money that I would argue they're making too much money, but that's another conversation. But at the same time, they're in charge of things that are far more valuable. Although, again, we're going to have to maybe change that conversation because when we get to the athletes, maybe they are managing $100 million, entities. I don't know.
When we get over there, we're going to see how murky the world is over there. The coaching contracts are a little more clear. Those are the ones that's more like you wonder how you hold anybody accountable. But the thing is, like here, Long-Time Republic, the Texas A&M AD who negotiated that buyout hightailed it to LSU a while back. So no wonder that Jimbo's name has always been associated with LSU, but if Brian Kelly slips there, But then to think about that, at least one thing you would think with a $76 million buyout, you'd tell them no compete or have have it where they would not be able to get another job. At least there would be some protection, but having an open-ended contract like that is just insane. Uh, but actually, there's a news article from ESPN. There's $146 million in buyouts owed to college coaches, to Power 5 football coaches since 2022.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and the article goes on to say that let's see, Jimbo's is the top with the $76 million, but also included in the $146 million since the beginning of the 2022 season was $15.5 million for Brian Harsin, who was fired from Auburn, $15 million from Scott Frost, who was fired from Nebraska, who was supposed to resurrect Nebraska's power football program, $11.5 million from Jeff Collins from Georgia Tech.
Ooh.
And that's not a big school. That's a private school in Georgia, an ACC. Here's a guy, $11 million for Paul Chryst, fired from Wisconsin in October 22. $8.7 million for Carl Dorrell, fired from Colorado in October 22. $4.4 million. This is a discount. How about this one for Herm Edwards? $4.4 million, fired from Arizona State in September 2022. And he's an NFL guy. You'd think he would have gotten a bigger payout. And here's another kicker, a one-year head coach. $4 million for Zach Arnett, who was fired from Mississippi State on Monday, who, by the way, got the job after Mike Leach passed away tragically before the bowl game last year. Zach Arnett took over, took Mississippi State to a bowl win, and got the job this year, but obviously didn't last a year. But there's $4 million walking for a one-year coach. So, and it just shows you how out of control that the buyouts are becoming and these things.
It doesn't seem to be any kind of an end, and there isn't any accountability because, again, there's all this money.
Mm-hmm.
These boosters have all this money. There's no accountability from the administration side because it's not their money. Mm-hmm. There's no accountability on the coach's side because he's going to get a check regardless, of how the school performs or who his team ends up being. I mean, and again, we're going to get into more ridiculous stuff here in a moment when we talk about the athletes being paid now. But we're looking at a point in time where there needs to be a different structure for college football because it's no longer amateur football. And that you don't really have owners per se as far as the teams go, but you certainly have singular entities that are and should be engaged in the management of it all, and nobody's engaged in it. We're going to get into that later.
Yep. And as like Small Town Republic says, eventually there'll be a market correction if enough disposable income evaporates. But then again, how much of this has been brought by the ESPN? I mean, football's everywhere. It's 7 days a week nowadays. It's taken a life of its own. There's so much money in the television. I mean, CBS, NBC, ABC, all the networks covered, the big contracts, the money, trying to go to a bowl game that doesn't mean anything's expensive as heck these days. That's like our local bowl game. I won't pay $50 for an exhibition game of two teams I don't like to see, but normally you would expect a market correction, but you'd almost have to get the money out of it. Like we said, the ESPN, the big network contracts, but the boosters and the direct support organizations, the foundations, the athletic foundations, that's where the money is. Most of this money, and one of these articles do talk about that, how this money is going to be taken from unrestricted funds through those groups, through those organizations. This is not state money. This is not, at all coming, taxpayers' money. It's like in the state of Florida, there's a law that limits any state compensation to $225,000 out of state funds. So if you look at the state of Florida football coaches, their contracts, when they exceed that, like the college university presidents, usually involve some other private foundation or a foundation that's separate from the university itself to fund all that other money and cost, because that's where the donations will go. The boosters donate to those funds. It's 501c3s. They get the tax write-offs. That's and I think a lot of people just think it. They see it's a state university and automatically assume it's government or it's the university itself. It's not really. It's these side agencies.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, a lot of them are managed in very murky ways. Whether they be public and isolated from it as a nonprofit, or they are private and are not isolated and just go out there and just throw zillions of dollars at various things, including athletes, which is something we're going to talk about here in a minute. But it's just
yeah,
absolutely insane. And this was the worst type of Pandora's box to open. And it was a conversation I think you and I had very early on in the nascency of your channel, where we were talking about the fact that this was not going to lead in a good direction and it was going to possibly tear college football apart.
And we're going to see more than just the players part of it. We're going to see what's happening from tradition, matchups, and a lot more before we end tonight. Which I personally, to me, as a lifelong I'm 53 years old. College football is becoming not what it used to be, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And beyond just the money, but we will see. We will see. It's almost becoming a de facto professional sport.
There's no distinction.
No.
That was what you and I talked. I almost can hear the conversation in my head right now.
I know we did.
There is no distinction now between professional athletes and college athletes because they aren't amateurs anymore.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead. I was just about to. Well, from that part, and I'm kind of jumping a little bit ahead to the next issue we're going to talk about a little bit. There was a story that I read. There was a college gymnast, but she did something different. She actually developed a game and then developed a company with it. So she's earning money off that when in school. When under the old rules, she couldn't have. But then again, now we've just got paid space. I saw a Dr. Pepper ad with Caleb Williams from USC the other day. It's just like an NFL player. So, really just like anybody else, there's no real distinction. There are rules and there are requirements on certain things that we'll sort of touch about, but you definitely need a law license to understand the NIL. I don't think either one of us can dare touch that in a million years fully and correctly.
Well, we're going to try, but
we're going to try. Yeah.
About Jimbo, right? In similar cases, I'm starting to question the sanity of that. And I think that if there's anything that the NCAA can actually still govern over, it's coaches' salaries. And I think they're going to have to do it. I really do. I understand it's what the market will bear, but out of their own best interest, in order for the NCAA to survive, they're going to have to figure out a way to get the handle on some of that.
Yeah.
Because it's not good. It's not good for the profession of coaching. All the money gets soaked up by 4 or 5 guys. It's not good. It's not good for it's not good for the universities themselves because they don't have a chance to. They'll never have a chance to compete. You could have some whiz bang genius coach out there, right? Like the guy that worked his way up through college and into the pros to become a sensation. But he's no longer with the school he was at. You didn't have a chance to keep that guy because everybody else had more money than you. It's just something's got to give. And my biggest problem with NIL, and we'll get to that in a minute. In fact, you know what? I'll save it.
Okay. Well, like Small Town Republic, we also got ego on top of money.
Oh,
one school doesn't want a big bet. Look at Alabama, Auburn. I mean, one's going to do the other thing. Florida, FSU, Michigan, Ohio State. You've got different things. So,
how long will Saban coach? Don't know.
Well, you know what the thing is, everybody's trying to write him off. Like they did this year, they struggled a little bit at the beginning and tried to write him up. So, Small Town Republic does hit it. Coaches getting fired after 1 or 2 seasons now, in part because of the pressure of the big money. Yeah, and that's true. Although I will say I will try not to go off on a deep end here. Small Town's heard me rant about my Florida coach that it's time for a change already. But it has nothing to do with the money. It has to do with what I see in game day. But Small Time Republic keeps reassuring me, be patient. So I'm trying. Listen to him out there, but it is serious because there are other people. See, my complaint truly is from the X and O's on the field, from what I see. But there are people that don't care what, as long as you're losing, you need to go. We see that Mississippi State fired Zach Arnett after 1 year, after choosing him after a bowl game last year. Why not give somebody more, longer chance to get ingrained? But I think, and I'm looking at myself as I say that. It's funny, Culture, because if you see me lately, I've been so I've been upset with my Gators, but it's been on the field stuff. But if you can see a team improving better and better, you can, because one of the pressures now is not just the money, and we'll talk about the competition. You can't, if you're a school, even say like I think the University of Florida, as big as it is with some of its history, you're going to be reduced to irrelevance now, being in the middle of the pack of these. Well, when we talk about the conferences coming up, it's going to be the haves and have-nots, and it's going to be very hard for the underdogs to come up or have your Cinderella stories even more. I want to share an article.
I don't know where they would come from.
Yeah.
I mean, and not only do you, and it's going to be the same in basketball and in anything. I mean, this is a big problem. It doesn't just exist in football, which is obviously where we're focused today, but it exists in basketball. It exists in college baseball. It's going to exist in all of the college sports, down to college golf. I mean, there's going to be less incentive for student, and this might be a good thing, but to be less incentive for students to move maybe from college basketball to pros. Mm-hmm. Because there's something to staying in school and getting an education, although I'm not sure anything college education is as valuable as it used to be now. But at the same time, I mean, maybe you get a finance degree while you're playing basketball. That seems like a logical thing to do. They're writing you some pretty big checks already in college. You got to figure out how to, deal with that money. Maybe it leads to some smarter athletes, maybe. But, it's going to be the same in baseball. There's no pressure to do one and done there now. Mm-hmm. Or I guess it's two and done or whatever it is in college. Yeah. But you understand my point. It's like, I got drafted and the club wants me to go and play for $20,000 down at the single A team, in Shreveport. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not going to do that, because if I go play college baseball, they're going to write me, a $700,000 a year check. Plus I get to go to school. What do you think the kid's going to pick if they're halfway break?
Right. And especially with these, well, we'll get in a second, but these deals, if you can get any type of money, it goes into there. It's and see, like Small Time Republic said, they're like that, one and done, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to say, get rid of it. Let them go pro immediately,
Yeah.
So,
that really only got put in there because you did have a handful of superstars. You had people who go straight from high school, probably their sophomore year of high school, to the pros.
Well, you're touching on something different, though. Baseball and basketball were always considered different, because you could have, I think Bob Horner was one that either didn't go to the minors or went very little, but from college. But you theoretically could have physical development where the NBA player or the baseball player could make the transition. The key is the argument's always been on the football side is the additional years, the time to size, to grow, to mature physically, to go from high school to the NFL, because they are so much larger, so much bigger. So, I think with sport. Let me show this real quick. This is one more article about the coaches' salaries here. Let's see. Hopefully it's large enough. But basically what we got here is the top 10 buyouts for college football coaches. Jimbo Fisher, obviously in 2023 for Auburn, takes the top with $76 million. Gus Malzahn, Auburn, $21.5 million back in 2020. And of course, we just mentioned Brian Harsin, who just got a double-digit buyout from Auburn last year. So that's twice, one school, twice, like Texas A&M, another school, 2 buyouts within 5 years. Well, A&M was about 6 years, but within 10 years, two schools have two major buyouts. Charlie Weiss, Notre Dame, 2009 at 19 million. Willie Taggart, which was a big surprise that this guy had that kind of buyout at FSU, $18 million. Ed Orgeron, $16.9 million. Tom Herman from the Longhorns of Texas, $15.4 million. Art Briles. Now, I'm surprised Art Briles got it because that was a big mess when he left Baylor, if you remember that. We were not going to touch that tonight. That's one of those could have been for cause, but and like I said earlier, two schools, Kansas, and there's another school that have fired coaches recently that did not get away with the for cause. And that's one thing too. People think, well, you write it in a contract and it'll be, you fire people because of reason. You got to litigate it. It goes to court. You got attorneys. Just because you and I think it may be, just because if there's another party, then you got a judge who can rule either way. And when it gets into court, you don't know where it's going. Scott Frost for Nebraska, $15 million. Bobby Petrino, $14 million, who, by the way, is currently, I think, still employed at Texas A&M as the offensive coordinator. And Will Muschamp, go Gators. Will Muschamp, gotta love him. 12.9 when he got fired at South Carolina in 2020. So, and look how in 2021, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, and 6 of those that are more than $12.9 million in. That's the last 2 years. So contracts, folks, and like I said, it's easier to say, well, fire, it's like, a lot of, it's always easier to say that you can fire somebody than actually do it, or say that, to implement a contract provision. And that's where two sides have to get together, come to a meeting of the minds. So, but it is interesting. Well, isn't it? Makes you not want to be a lawyer, or I guess it could make you want to be a lawyer. You get a good payday.
I mean, you're taking a percentage of everybody's misery. That's how I look at lawyers. I mean, maybe that's not kind, but it's true. Everybody's misery is your payday. Great.
Yeah.
Serve it up.
Exactly. And Wade, we did talk about Colorado because I did mention your former coach before Dion, his buyout too. So
there you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
We look at these numbers, right? And you just ran down a whole list of them and you're like, this is dumb. Who in their right mind is making this stuff happen? Right? It's lawyers on both ends. Lawyers up front negotiate the deals. Lawyers at the end, litigate the deal. And that's it.
I think part of the problem becomes, like we said here, ego. And especially the people that run the universities and stuff like this, they don't want to fall behind. Everybody wants to win and stuff like that. But my gosh, how much can you realistically afford to pay somebody? These coaches get more than even presidents are doing. Forget politicians and stuff. To not even produce anything, that's a hell of a buyout, And everybody says it's the market. It's the market. But until there's a big market crash, I don't think, like what Small Town Republic had said earlier, a market correction, I don't know. It could be it'd have to take a huge crash for it to happen. But as long as there's money, as long as people have money and they throw it in there, they're going to happen. It's going to be thrown around. So, and yeah, Teague, like here, this is a point that Admiral Teague has talked about. Like here, take the state of Georgia. Said to be 26,000 average per capita income, 500 per week per tax. And so then basically you've got in Georgia, So the Kirby Smart contract is no, it's not crowdfunded. What it is that you have these nonprofit organizations, or they could be for profit too. Either way, but they're athletic foundations. They come in, people donate to them. That's where they pile up the monies. And then these contracts generally are written through the athletic contracts. Many times the contract's not with the university, it's with the athletic foundation. And, that's the source of the funding through private donations. Specifically, A&M has said, the articles have said that A&M buyout is being paid from unrestricted funds that are in those booster foundations. So it does, in the Small Town Republic, we're not even going to really get time to talk about this tonight. Culture, especially in Florida, this has been an issue. Like the Florida Gators supposedly were behind on their facilities. So now everybody's got to have state of the art this, state of the art that. It's bad enough in the NFL we see it, but that's a business. But in college, it's like you got to have all these facilities supposed to. That's another component for recruiting. So, all right. Well, that's it. You got any other thoughts on the coaches for now before we jump to another issue?
No, but every time I talk about this, I get frustrated because it's like, okay, because it's all one convoluted mess, not just the coaching thing, but what we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because it's the last thing a sports fan wants to talk about.
And especially an amateur sports fan.
Well, especially somebody that makes it worse. It makes it worse.
It does. And especially, you lived all your life. You're used to sports, your team pride, your civic pride, all this stuff. And then it's like, it's basically turned over to mercenaries, in a way. Sorry if it's not necessarily the best term to use there, but it's everybody goes to the highest bidder in many cases. How many times are we going to see the true student athlete that will go to the school because they wanted to go there? It's that's what made Georgia's quarterback last year, Nathan Stetson Bennett, such a cool story. Because the kid wanted to go to Georgia. He's from a small Georgia town, ended up going to Georgia, walked on, couldn't make it, so he went to play community college ball in Mississippi, went back to Georgia, was 3 down on the depth chart because of an injury and a bad freshman. He got to play and never looked back. I mean, that's one of those rags to riches stories, which sadly college is starting to lose a lot of that stuff now. All right. So, the next topic we're going to try to touch on a little bit, but neither one of us are lawyers. So go consult a lawyer for the best technical thing on it. But it doesn't, I'm going to try to keep it at a surface level because it does affect recruiting. It does affect the game of college football. And it's the name, image, likeness rules that have been implemented. And really, there's still interim guidance. The NCAA implemented these rules in 2001, June 2021, and actually did so short after a major court case that came to be. Let's see.
Yeah, the Supreme Court has really kind of put all of this in the situation that we're in. And all of this kind of really started to come to a head in 2021.
Yep. And I got the article here. I actually had a
Excellent.
PDF, but PDF.
Sweet.
But let's see. Let me see if I don't destroy the stream right now. That's always dangerous when it's a Politico article where they talked about the Supreme Court rules in favor of athletes in an NCAA compensation case. And it wasn't even a split decision. It's a 9-0 court case. So you can see where the court is. There was no, there is no split decision. No, the court left no room for argument on this one. But
no, there's no ambiguity. The decision that was written, the majority opinion that was written by Neil Gorsuch was clear.
Yep. And basically, it represented a landmark victory for college players in a significant moment, as long so it allowed athletes to profit from personal endorsements and sponsorships. So, in response to this, the NCAA implemented some interim guidance. So, in the decision, the Supreme Court focused on whether the NCAA's hard limits on athlete compensation violated antitrust law, not the policy debate on player endorsements that are within the politics at the time, but the antitrust case represented a fundamental threat to athletic associations' business model, which is playing out in the NCAA and lobbies on how to regulate players can sign third-party endorsements. So this was really this was the trigger that started everything else to happen in the last 2 years, and it's been a really dog eat dog. It's been very, like I said, trying to do research on this. It's hard to find solid information. It's hard to find what's the current thing, what's clearly. You need the sources. You need a lawyer to define a lot of these terms, like collectives and certain things like that. So, this is one of a number of cases. They basically, in the article goes on to say that Brett Kavanaugh, in a scathing concurring opinion blasted the NCAA for its arguments that it was immune from antitrust scrutiny. So, and it gets back to market rates and paying employees. And, to side back to our conversation on the coaches, there's a lot of fear for the NCAA now, either on this NIL deal or the coaches to get involved because of decisions like this. They fear the antitrust rulings now.
Yes, they do.
So,
and that's the biggest problem. The NCAA has been in violation of antitrust probably since its inception.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was all kinds of restraint of trade arguments that could have been made all the way back from its foundational point when it got involved as heavily as it did in the governance of all the various sports. Then there was an opportunity to roll them back as well when we ended up with these weird Title IX things and everything else. So this has been a long time coming. Let's just put it that way. And as trudgingly along as it was all dragged, I would still argue that college sports will never be the same after the decision here for name, image, and likeness. I don't know. Maybe I know I'm jumping ahead here.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We kind of like to call it squirreling around here with whatever we go comes up. And sometimes it's like, say it while you're thinking about it. But the NCAA NIL rule, the interim policy was passed in 2021, had three main parts. One, that athletes can engage the NIL activities if they follow their state's laws where the school is located. Schools must ensure these activities comply with the state law. Culture, how many states do we have in this union?
Well, there's 50, and there's also territories. So, yes, but 50 states and multiple territories.
Okay. Well, okay. I think I got an article on that too. But, don't all the states agree with each other all the time? Boy, you can see this one.
Rah.
Yeah.
No, there are states that have very adversarial relationships. I mean, some of them even divided in parts because they didn't like each other. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Well, the second part is that number 2 is athletes in states without NIL laws can participate in NIL activities without breaking the NCAA rules. And this is from let's see the site, I guess, from an NCAA website about the NIL. They have, and the third part is the athletes are allowed to seek professional service providers for their NIL activities. Student athletes should report NIL activities consistent with their state law, school, and conference requirements to their school. So examples of the NIL activities could now be paid for: autographs and memorabilia, camps and clinics, personal appearances, merchandise, affiliate or ambassador roles, NFTs, blogging, podcasting, public speaking, music, art, etc. So, they have proposed, they have implemented some guidance, some rules, but then again, anytime you allow state-to-state enforcement or rules, bets are off because some states have actually been known to. They passed it originally at first. Then they found out they were too restrictive, so they ended up trying to make it like the others and make it less restrictive. Because what happens to you if you're too restrictive in your state? You're going to hurt recruiting. You're not going to be able to offer the best deal for somebody to be able to come into the state. And without uniform guidance, how can you control this in any way?
Okay, so, but see, this is the double-edged sword of the antitrust thing. Because if the NCAA were to step in and say, these are the things that have to happen, well, now they're governing the situation. So they could fall under the auspices of an antitrust suit. Whereas, if they leave it up to the individual universities, states, whatever it is, municipalities, it doesn't matter. If they leave it up to somebody else, they are no longer, entangled in some very dicey areas. This was all handled very poorly. There was no good plan going into how to manage this. There is no good plan currently to manage it, even down at the institutions of the schools levels. They are all handling this very poorly. I without some form of standardization by some kind of standardization body,
No. But
it's never going to be the same.
right. And like the small town republic is saying, part of the original commission is to be a leader, yet they go crying to Congress instead of making their own decisions. But the problem is if you had everybody that in the NCAA that had to obey every single decision that was handed down and could not sue or anything, yeah, you could. But when they can sue you, and then the potential liability for antitrust violations, all that stuff, you got to have everybody willing to obey the rules that are issued for everybody. And until you do that, you can't have a standard set of rules, that everybody accepts, because the smaller schools are going to claim that it's benefiting the big schools. The big schools are going to say, well, we're not given enough freedom, why should we be held back for others? It's a mess. It's a convoluted system. But if you could have, like, we play a game, Mrs. and I do, in my world, like bad drivers out there. In my world, you would get this car for doing something, But if it was truly where the NCAA could legitimately say, this is what we're doing, everybody has to obey, you could have some normalcy, you could have some standards, but the threat of litigation, I think, rules over everything these days.
Well, and okay, so one of the proposals early on that I agreed with is, this is the amount of money you get paid for playing professional football. I don't care what level player you are. This is the top. This is the cap. So if you are a kicker, this is it's the same cap. If you're a quarterback, it's the same cap. That's the maximum amount of money that you can collect for name, image, likeness. Okay, because otherwise, I need a mechanism that allows me to tax your scholarship money. Understand? So if kids are coming in, they're not paying for their education, what's that education worth? What are other people paying that tuition? How much is that? Because that is another form of income, and it should 100% be taxed. And I mean, there's a whole lot of things here. Fixed tuition costs, or then you have a whole thing that throws the entire institutions of higher education into a financial crosshairs, because there are schools that get away with a whole lot of things under the guise of scholarships and other types of monetary dispensation that, if they were to come under the lens of antitrust, they're in big trouble. So now we've shifted from allowing exemptions for certain institutions from certain practices and responsibilities that are now themselves being placed under scrutiny of things that in their governance. This is really convoluted. This was a can of worms, a Pandora's box that never should have been open.
One of the articles from ESPN by Dan Murphy back from June 30th, 2021, when this first went in, a couple of questions addressed were, who is making rules? Basically, it said there are roughly a dozen states that have laws in effect. This is back then. Since then, many, many states have passed their own laws for that. The NCAA instructed individual schools and states that did not have a law in effect to craft their own policies based on loose guidelines designed to prevent pay-for-play deals, and that payments that are used as recruiting inducements. The schools were not allowed to pay athletes directly, because when we talk about these the 501c3s now, and especially in IL, there are these things called collectives. They can be for-profit or not-for-profit collectives, depending on, so their taxability status. So they're the ones that actually arrange these deals for the student athletes, and schools. What the schools have to have those collectives to be able to run these programs. What if a school can't design a collective for itself to be able to get it to compete with others? So basically, they still don't have rules that restrict boosters from paying athletes, as long as it directly for athletic performance or for an inducement for recruiting purposes. Some state laws restrict schools from arranging deals for athletes. NCAA rules leave the decision up to individual schools, but it warns schools to be careful they don't cross lines into an area that could be considered paying the players or using NIL payments as recruiting tools. So yeah,
It's all payment. It's all, that's the thing. The universities are, even as a standby, as a passerby, these are syndicates at this point. The university is now becoming a syndicate to operate and to influence the direction of funds to the parties that it needs to be successful. It is no difference than, it is essentially becoming, if not a criminal enterprise, at least adjacent to one.
Yeah, and even back then, this article goes on. Let's see, to talk about why isn't there one universal set of rules for all college athletes. Basically, back then, the article was addressing that the NCAA had hoped Congress would help it pass a federal law that would create one consistent standard for all college athletes, but Congress could not agree on a national law. And the article says the NCAA was concerned, and this is June of 2021, is concerned that the organization could face legal challenges due to antitrust violations if it creates its own set of NIL restrictions without the backing of federal law. So what we have now is a state by state system, state by state laws still at this point. And speaking of the federal laws, there are actually four different pieces of legislation as of July 2023 that have come up. And I cut it off wrong, but basically we'll just cut it off here because I see, put it this way, there's four different bills in front of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats. Some are bipartisan, to deal with these things and different things about either oversight, health and safety, other types of provisions, with the whole thing. So, but then again, still no action. So you can kind of see the NCAA's stance of how do we move forward when we've already been blasted on antitrust before, but then we got dog eat dog culture.
No, I don't know what to add to this. It's incredibly frustrating.
Yes.
Because, the rules went into effect with no rules. And so we're a year plus down the road, or a year and a half down the road from that point in time, and nobody has anything out there.
I will stay off the political ends because I've seen that there are other things that have happened with that rules that were thrown out in a hurry that just magically have no rules to this day. But hey, we won't get on that sidetrack. But yeah, so the NIL, and my biggest problem with this, we'll try to bring it back into the world of how it's changing the future college athletes, because before, like I said, you're not going to necessarily get that big recruit if he's looking for the money and another school can offer him a better deal. We all know that they're going to go to the best deal. They can say whatever they want to.
Yeah, well, that's also true, but here's another truth for you. The students in a lot of situations aren't bound. They're told that they need to let the universities know of any NIL deals that they have, but nobody's going to hold their feet to that. The university is certainly not going to investigate it or be invested in making sure that the student athlete is reporting that they signed a speaking deal to speak for 20 minutes for $2 million over at the Taco Bell. You understand?
Yeah.
It's at this point, it's just like, here is a bag of cash. Talk to us about your thoughts on spaying and neutering your pets.
And in some ways, I see, but I will say that in some ways it has been good, because I did read an article. There was an story about a gymnast at one college that actually had developed a gymnastics game as a kid and is now being able to market and sell it online. Whereas in the old days, this is part of the problem with the old NCAA rules were so draconian. This kid could not have made money off of it. But now, because under the new rules, can actually set up a company and sell it and market it. So it's kind of like we're balancing the old, because we got to admit, the old days were really, really dark. They were really cumbersome and bad. They had their drawbacks. The good old days were not always good. But so there are some benefits we can see from it, but I think those are outweighed by the negatives, because if you have old school coaches, they don't want to use the NIL, or school can't get the NIL, you're behind. It's like the transfer portal is another thing that we're only going to be able to skirt real quickly here. It's now like free agents to the Wild West. Now we can talk about this part here because it's dog eat dog now. There's no more, hey, I got my quarterback for 4 years. I get watching from a freshman to senior. Sam Hartman was one at Wake Forest. Thought he'd be there forever. He's at Notre Dame this year for his senior year. Where's the tradition? And we're going to see about the conference coming up. Go ahead.
No, but that's even a bigger issue, right? Because as kids develop themselves, which let me tell you, agents start working with these kids now in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So this agent's going to say, okay, we need to develop your social media presence. We need to get you We need to, you need to say positive things about this university because there are better financial deals over here that we can get, and then these kids are going to bounce around within this transfer portal like it's nobody's business. Because if they have a halfway decent agent and they're really good at marketing themselves, they have a pretty good team behind them. It's quite possible these kids could just bounce schools all the time.
They're not allowed to hire agents per se, but we know that they have people, consultant. We know there are people behind them beyond just the family.
I will never be that naive to think that they're not, and neither are you. That's the thing.
No, I know.
I mean, some of these agents start with these kids, especially with baseball and basketball players when they're like 10, 12.
Those camps, the summer camps, all the different.
Yeah, and you're looking at a kid who went to several sports camps. So I knew what was there. I knew who was there, and I knew why they were there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've, like I said, it's another thing that's really hurting the tradition of college football because, like Florida lost out on an NIL deal this year. Jaden Rashada was a quarterback committed to Miami. Then he was going to go to Florida, had an NIL deal, which, somehow, I don't know how a deal falls apart, but it did. So he ends up at Arizona State this year. So, so apparently just going to the University of Florida was not good enough, in that case. So a lot of things it's another element where the future of college football is changing. The history is being eliminated because it was nice because, you could watch a player go 4 years, and now it's just the Wild West with people just transferring. It started a few years ago when they allowed grad transfers, to go for that extra year because Urban Meyer at Florida mastered that early on because Florida's national championships in the 05, 06, that area utilized a few of those.
Well, yeah, and again, I mean, you started to get fudging with redshirt years, and then you started to get injury eligibility requirements, instituted, if a kid didn't get enough time in, and all of that. And I get it, right? You want everybody to have their best shot. But at the same time, I mean, some of these kids, I mean, think about some of these quarterbacks, like they're so bright at the same time as being a quarterback. First of all, you have to be real smart to be a quarterback for a lot of these offensive systems.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, some of these guys are engineering minds. And so, they not only are they drafting plays, around the field and understanding everything at every element level, they're also doing that in the classroom. So some of them are ready to graduate the end of their sophomore year, midway through their junior year, and they stick it out. And some of them end up in graduate programs and everything else early on. So it's just, I mean, because a lot of them have been taking, college level classes since high school, because again, they want to get into the best university. They want to, get to the best coach.
And early admission too. I think you touched on because I mean, it's get in school as early as you can, get into the weight program, get into the playbook, and
you want to be in the gym, the cafeteria, and in the classroom, so that you understand everything that's going to go on in the program. Because you could be 2 years into a program before you're actually a freshman.
Right.
That's the thing. As far as on the books, anyway.
Yeah, on the books. Yeah, it's all a game depending on how many hours and stuff. And yeah, it's. I will say though, in defense of the players, though, it is kind of a dirty industry too, though, on the school side too, because you do hear many cases where the players lose their scholarship, because either they go down the What's that? What's the hand? Talk to the hand.
Oh, I'm trying to get my camera to focus.
Oh, it's like I thought you're pulling a Schwarzenegger or something in Terminator.
No,
That's it.
no.
But that is one thing that that you have heard before when a player's uses life, their usefulness to the school, or there's a better play. The scholarships get revoked. So it is. I think also a reaction to that part of the business.
Well, all they had to do to solve that was to say permanent scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to offer a kid we'll expand the scholarship program. We had 5 more scholarships, but any scholarship you offer is permanent. Mm-hmm. That scholarship gives them 4 years of class time. And you know what? Really, that's just something called doing the right thing. That's an ethical decision, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is very interesting. So let's get to the one more topic that we have tonight in the remaining minutes. God, it's amazing how fast time flies when you're talking some of these issues. And with the Great Culture Casino, friends, thank you so much. Hey, all right, conference realignment. This is one that we only have about 15 minutes that we could spend the whole show on. But my gosh, we had big issues already. But listen, and actually, since the last time you and I talked in person, things have happened.
And they're worse than we thought.
They're worse. And I'm going to show this graphically. Unfortunately, this is the best graphic I could find. Oops, hold on a second.
Better than any graphic I could find. So.
Well, the thing is, there was nothing that was encompassed everything that had just transpired. But I don't know if you could actually do that. So I'm going to use a map of
It'd be hard. I mean, you need. Oh my gosh, here you go. Good gravy.
I worked my butt off last night to look for this. So it's like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure out where I'm at with this stupid.
I think you had it.
There you go. All right.
Yeah. There you are.
Quit playing with the screens. Yeah. Dad Manning. Hey, you got to see Dad Manning in action. At least I didn't crash the stream this time.
We're good. We're
good. All right. Well, hey, listen, there's another article that I want to get in here, but it is there. It's behind this. That's what I did. We have conference realignments that have happened. 2023 happened. Well, the first started when the great state of Texas, that Texas and Austin had to be different. Them in Oklahoma
had to join the SEC. And they screwed everything up.
Yes, they did. And they couldn't do it 1 year. They couldn't do it the next year. They decided, we'll wait 2 years. Everybody said, okay, fine, settle down. We'll do it in 2 years, 2024. Well, what happens last year? Everybody gets butt hurt. And there's a bunch of realignment this year in 2023. UCF moves. You got teams joining the Big 12 on top of Texas and Oklahoma for Texas and Oklahoma to leave next week, next year. So, but as I tried to illustrate with this particular graphic, not only, okay, SEC's fine. You see Texas, Oklahoma down there. That makes some geographic sense, right? You get the Big 12 that picked up a couple teams in here. Okay, that was okay. But you know what? The Big 10 said, hold my beer.
Yeah.
They went, now this map does not show, but the Big 10 has schools up here in New Jersey, actually Rutgers up in here.
Yeah.
Stretches from New Jersey now all the way through the Midwest out to Washington and Oregon, folks.
And
we truly have a coast to coast conference nowadays.
Oh. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because basically they ate the Pac-12. They said,
yep. Oh, first of all, they brought in UCLA and USC. That was the first step.
Yeah.
Then that was not enough. They decided to bring in, well, I think next what had happened, the Big 12 said, hey, you hold our beer, Big 10, and got Colorado, Utah, and the Arizona teams
to
come to the Big 12, which makes sense geographically when you look at the Big 12. That's not so bad. But then the Big 10 said, hey, we're not done. We're going to poach Washington and Oregon, which leaves the wonderful big Pac-12 conference with 2 teams for next year, the Washington State Cougars and my Oregon State Beavers, 2 schools that could technically face a very dark future. There's some rumors that Pac-12 may be allowed to have another year to keep its major conference status, but can you imagine trying to rebuild a Pac-12 with anything else that's out there?
Well, you have to go and grab all the schools. You gotta grab Nevada, you gotta
Hmm.
grab, Idaho, you gotta grab, I mean, Boise, I should say. You gotta grab all those ones that used to be like the 3rd tier, 2nd tier, 3rd tier schools is what you
Hmm.
have to go do. I mean, New Mexico, I'm surprised New Mexico is gonna be, like, out in the cold, both of those schools down there.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm looking around and going, "There's nada out there that, that could help build the Pac-12 back to where it was.
No, you're
You know,
basically taking the
and
discount leftovers to add
I
to a
mean,
conference.
I, because of family members, I mean, I was a Pac-8 guy from way back,
Hmm.
right? Which then became the Pac-10, which then
Right.
became the Pac-12,
Which then I
and all that.
forgot something. The ultimate set per the ultimate conference had said hold both. You hold our beer and our car on top of it. The Atlantic Coast Conference, which
Yeah,
has schools from Georgia Tech, from Florida State to Georgia Tech, up to the Carolinas, up to Virginia, up to Boston, Massachusetts. All that on the
yeah,
East Coast, right?
yeah.
They ended Stanford and California. And for good measure, they take Texas, SMU, SMU out of Dallas. It's like, what the heck? It makes no
See,
sense.
okay, so here's the problem with adding. Okay, so when you add a state school from California, you get all the California baggage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you add a private school from California, you don't. So I'm not sure why that happened, but
Why?
okay.
I believe the
Uh,
ACC feared that it was going to be irrelevant for some reason.
well,
Basketball, whatever else.
outside of basketball, they are already. I mean, it's not.
Well, well, there were. It was interesting. There were 4 schools in the initial expansion talk that refused to vote. Well, the question is that they were one of the schools was strong arm, and I believe the rumor was NC State flipped because it was Clemson, FSU, North Carolina State that were against the original bringing Stanford and Cal in. Okay, so then they went back. They decided to bring Stanford, Cal, and SMU got thrown in. SMU waiving their rights to ACC collection fee, royalties for a number of years. So it's like, who does that? Like you're paying for the right to join. So the rumor was that probably NC State that rolled over. That actually, and as bad as it was, FSU. There are articles out there that FSU has talked about having had law firms hired and accountants and all researching what it would take to leave the Atlantic Coast Conference. And Clemson seems to be right behind them too. So it's not. I mean, it's almost like you got a forced merger with that. In that case, how do you keep everybody happy within the conference?
It ain't gonna happen.
And
And not only can you. Okay, so this creates a whole other problem that nobody's going to talk about. Travel schedules.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
You okay, so not only do you have to organize all this crap a year ahead of time with hotels, airlines, all that other stuff, right? And you have to move not just the teams. If we're just going to talk about football,
mm-hmm.
not just
Right.
the football stuff, but now you have to move the band, you have to move all the support stuff and everything else. They all have to go on the road.
Yep.
Now, you put those you go coast to coast over the course of a week. That's a logistical nightmare. Not to mention the fact that the student athletes, right? That's what they are. F that noise. But
Yeah.
anyway, those student athletes are now like not in school for a week at a time regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that they were before. I mean, travel schedules have been tough for a while, but this makes it way worse. If are they there for
Yeah.
education or are they there for the financial gratification of
Mm-hmm.
of the school and themselves? That's a good question.
Well, and also we talked about the other parts of the show about the future college athletics. Here's the beginning of, well, no, it started I think when Texas A&M and Missouri joined the SEC.
Mhm.
You had the end of the Texas A&M rivalry. Now that'll be restored. Oklahoma's still gonna be there now. That's gonna be reunited. They'll be reunited with Arkansas. But I just saw that they signed a bill or they signed a contract to keep the Apple Cup going between the two Washington teams.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to Oregon State? Will they do the same? I mean, you look at like Oregon and Stanford,
you're
Cal. You did have some other
your
rivalries within these
non-conference.
groups.
Yeah, right, exactly. And now the new it used to be your neighbor and in your conference will now be your non-conference game. You don't get a cupcake. If you want to maintain your traditional game, your rivalry game, those are going to get eaten up by your non-conference game, which means you don't get a cupcake. You're going to be playing. I'll give you an example: the Territorial Cup, which is the longest championship exchange of rivalry between Arizona State, right? That is now going to be a hot mess because even though I believe they both ended up in the same place,
right? They ended up both in the Big 12.
Yeah, that will be harder for them to schedule within that new conference. But you also have games now that are not Arizona State. You have games where you have teams that have been traditional rivals forever and are not in the same conference anymore. That's not going to work good.
Well, and to your point, within the conference, the flipping SEC, I want to play Tennessee every year. Why? Because I hate Tennessee. I love singing Rocky Top now. It's really sick and weird, but it's funny. But I hate Tennessee. That's one of my passionate rival teams. But there's talk in the SEC that rivalry, that matchup may go away because they're having to do away with the divisions and decide who gets to be the quote natural rivals. And like me, it's hard enough for me. We get stuck with LSU in the West every year. They don't mean anything to me. I'd rather play Auburn every year, but Florida doesn't. We get stuck with LSU.
So where's Baylor? Where's Baylor now?
Baylor will still be in the Big 12.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, so they're still there. But the whole problems, even within the conferences, it's causing nightmares. Tennessee wants to keep Florida and South Carolina. I didn't realize South Carolina was such a big rival to them, but something's going to give at some point with it.
Well, okay, so like Alabama has multiple rivalry games. So does Auburn, right?
Right.
LSU has a couple. I mean, what are you going to do with all of that? I mean, the SEC, anytime you expand these conferences, it becomes more of a freaking nightmare.
And the SEC has another problem. See, Alabama used rightly. Auburn, obviously, LSU, and Tennessee, Alabama is a huge rivalry, especially the people in Tennessee. You got 3 or 4 natural rivals. How do you get them? And especially since SEC, supposedly it's been because of the contract with ESPN, they will stick with 8 games, whereas some of the other conferences are moving to 9 games conference schedules. The SEC is staying in an 8 conference game format for whatever reason, and other than TV. And
it gives them cupcakes, dude. It gives them cupcakes.
But see, you lose that matchup like Tennessee or somebody that you've grown to hate over the years.
Sure, but again, the SEC they play a bunch of dude. You line up the cupcakes, man.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. Well, yeah, but you know what? Here I will sum it up because I know
our pregame. We're gonna write a check to this team that we're gonna beat the pants off of, so that we can get our pregame in on them. Okay.
Well, you never know. That Auburn said that this weekend, but New Mexico State. Occasionally, it'll happen.
It will. You get dump trucked like Appalachian State dump trucks teams.
Michigan.
From time to time.
I love that. But hey, this is ultimately where it could hurt.
Yeah.
Auburn has been playing Georgia since 1892, and that could go away.
Yeah.
Because it's a cross-divisional rival right now. Auburn has Alabama. It has LSU. It has geographical natural rivals.
Yeah.
Guaranteeing that game with Georgia. Look what happened years ago when Notre Dame quit playing Michigan every year. I think there's some of the rivalries that even Notre Dame lost, and some of the other teams have lost.
Notre Dame is just a victim of its own pride, but that's a different conversation. Overall, I look at I look at these things and I think, okay, conference realignment, the NIL, and coach contracts. They're all tied to one thing.
Okay.
Money.
There you go. Money rules it all. It's like the ring of power, at the end of the day. It's the money. Yeah. It's the money. Real quickly, I will summarize it here in terms of the Uh, the expansions, let's see, 2023. The ACC will expand to 2020 in 2024. They will expand by adding Cal, SMU, Stanford. Of course, they have Boston College, Clemson, Boston College, Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. But still, keep an eye on FSU. There's enough rumor, there's enough proven articles out there about them actually doing legal research, spending the money and stuff to do research about leaving the conference because they were not happy with the revenue sharing already. Money again, just because the conference expands does not mean it's all well within it. So you got the Big Ten, in 2020, this year, 2023 remains at 14. In 2024, they will add Oregon, UCLA, USC, Washington, but we've seen how it's going to be coast to coast from Rutgers in New Jersey through Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, down to Maryland also. It stretches into Nebraska. The Big 12 added BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF in 2023. In addition to Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, West Virginia. So then in 2024, Oklahoma and Texas leave for the SEC. Colorado rejoins the conference and brings in Arizona State, and Utah from the Pac-12 to become 16 teams. The Pac-12 essentially disintegrates in 2024 down to the Beavers and Washington State. Again, there's still merging news about that, and like I think Small Tub Republic said, it's financially it's not advantage. I look at that long term is that they get sucked up either by the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or by the Big 10, because I don't see there's nothing left. It would be taking mud and trying to make a new conference culture. The teams that are out there, no disrespect to them, they're not big enough. They're not powerful enough. They don't have the financial resources, because like Oregon State had a $30 million athletic budget. How do you justify that when you play in a conference where you might have a $10 million athletic budget?
Yeah, and then of course you have Oregon, which has a unlimited, budget.
Yes, exactly. So exactly, and this is a small town republic. They got Cal, Stanford, and SU's because FSU and Clemson are trying to leave. Can you imagine the ACC without FSU and Clemson?
No,
exactly. But there's a couple more of the minor conferences, but we will. Whoops. I know. Oh, there you. Hey, there you are.
Yeah, I tried to give you a heads up, but all of a sudden
I know. We're going to wrap up here. That's why I cut off. I cut off right there because the others, Sun Belt, Mountain West, MAC. There's all realignments among the smaller conferences.
But here's the thing: if you watch those smaller conferences, right? And one of my favorite teams is Boise State, right? Yep. And watching the smaller stuff is more gratifying to me than sometimes the bigger conferences. So I give a lot of props to those schools.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I will still say, Culture, as you keep your eye on news, watch this for FSU and Clemson, because that will be the next domino to fall. We talk about only 4 power conferences now without the Pac-12.
It's going to be down. It'll be down to 3. It'll be down to 3.
I equate it to accounting firms. It used to be the Big 8 accounting firms 30 years ago. That's the 5. Now it's 3. Same thing with conferences, because ACC will be like the Pac-12, even if they had 10 teams without FSU and Clemson. The history of those programs.
I think if anybody's going to legislate anything when it comes to college sports, they should deign to dictate that there can be no more than 12 teams in an athletic conference.
I agree with you,
because it solves all the problems, and everybody will try to keep what they've got, but over time and with proper parity, everything will balance back out to the way it was before. Again, the mighty dollar ruled everything. But again, that takes administrative enforcement, which doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at a conference level.
Yeah, and that's what made it. The parity is what made college football great. That's what still makes college basketball what it is in March Madness. Is that we can see now 16 teams. We can see, we've seen 16 seed teams beat the number 1 seed team finally, but for now, it gets down to the end of it. But it just the tradition, the loss of these games. the threat of a lot of these natural rivals just being gone. At least Arizona State stayed together.
Yeah,
Oregon
but
State, Washington State
but
didn't.
that's the one example, the longest title rivalry ever, right?
Yep.
And then you have other schools that got busted up, and I'm like going, that's 100-year tradition, or not quite 100-year, but it's like
Yep.
it's damn close, that you're breaking up, and I'm
Yep.
like, that's
And
not good
it's
stuff.
a good Thanksgiving Day rivalry, or Thanksgiving week thing. So, Thanksgiving, Arizona State, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech. You got some great rivalries. Auburn, Alabama. So anyway, do you watch college hockey?
I'm answering him right now.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, no, I do whenever I can, whenever I have time, and it happens to be on. Yes, and a lot of that goes back to family members who were hockey players at all levels.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
yeah,
Well,
I have some cousins. Yeah.
If anybody knows the sports inside and out, it's definitely you, because you've seen it from the inside and the outside. And Buddy Hepburn, they need untethered college football conferences from other sports. That might help too. But hey, speaking of that,
they can't do that because of that title. I'm not going to say it.
The title, the Title IX.
Title IX.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to use other.
I know. I heard you. You did good.
Other words there, but yes.
Oh, but hey, well, we'll go ahead and end it up. Any final thoughts with you right now? I mean, we covered a heck of a lot.
We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. We talked about some things that really do get me frustrated all over again with what's happening in college athletics. And look, there are non-revenue sports that Small Time Republic was talking about. The problem is that none of these conference realignments are gonna positively benefit any of the people that are in the non-revenue sports, and none of the NIL money is going to help them out. There are only 3 sports, maybe 4, possibly 5, that'll benefit from NIL money. That's it.
Yep. Well, it's just, I just look at the sad tragedy of the loss of rivalries, of the competitive balance. That's really what I miss, because how passionate I am about my college sports. It's the tradition, it's the history, and it's the bands, it's all the kind of stuff like that. And it's, hell, I even hate the stupid flashing lights that they do after a damn touchdown these days. It's like, dang it, stop. We don't need that NFL garbage crap.
I would rather have a horse riding out onto the field with a flag for a college team. I would rather have the drum and bugle corps go bananas.
I would rather have the Boomer Schooner. That's what's calling for Bevo, the steer from Austin. Yeah,
yes,
that's college football.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting passionate, but hey, anyway, we gotta wrap up here with this. But we hit a lot of stuff. We understand the future is dark. Don't try to understand the NIL, because nobody will understand it, and it's murky. And
not until somebody actually takes responsibility for it.
Exactly. Well, let me say this real quick. Let me do a couple of outro items real quick.
There you go.
Talk to you for just a second. Tomorrow night, you know this girl. Tomorrow night, she's coming on with me to talk football. Florida State. Who else? You got to have the Queen of Florida when it comes to Florida State weekend. It's her encore appearance. She was here the same time last year. Great friend of the channel, great friend of culture, great friend to all of us out there. You never meet a nicer person as real in person as you will see on the YouTube. So join us tomorrow night there. So
she's a darling. She is a darling.
Absolutely. Teague, I will answer that on tomorrow night. You come back tomorrow night, I'll kick that question. We'll have more time tomorrow night.
Go.
So, but join me and Lorena tomorrow night for more college football talk, our last SEC regular season. I don't have a slide yet, but a week from Thursday, I'm planning on a conference championship special where I have Small Time Republic talking about the SEC. I'll be handling the ACC, JT Kirk, the Big 10, Whoopa Troopa, the Big 12, and I've got a guest that I'm hoping gets committed for the Pac-12. So, hey, we'll see that. So, little tease there. Join me on special announcement for Thursday. Thursday night, we are actually, Mrs. and I are with Masters Maniac Mexico who's in many of our chats. He's a Twitch streamer also. We're going to have a Thanksgiving special with him, and he's scheduled to make Mexican dishes during the stream.
Oh, that's cool.
So join us. If you don't have plans, join us with this Thursday afternoon, actually. Come in, say hi, and a special time, and hope to see you as Ken. If not, watch the replay. Should be a lot of fun. And maybe something else brewing with them for another holiday. But this one's going to be a Mexican theme, so hope you join us for that if you can, as you can. And if you don't have plans, definitely make so 3:00 right in the middle of the football games on Thursday. So, all right. And then also chill chats or something, or random, really for the next probably month. I'll have a few scheduled streams. A lot of them are going to be impromptu, whether it's chill chats or the Fortnite things, culture. Dude, you and Lorena, I'd love to have you come play again with me. You guys were a riot. Even if you want to do just that was a riot, sir. That was one of the best, most fun streams I ever had.
We could certainly try it again. I have zero skill when it comes to Fortnite. If we're like doing anything else,
It's culture. The way I look with Fortnite, it's just having fun among friends.
I know.
And y'all were. I got that clip with you driving the truck. You actually were doing what I do at the time. I was famous for blowing up gas stations with the truck. You did what I was doing, and Lorena's screaming, I need a ride. I need a ride. It was great clips, but it was a magical moment. But hey, the less serious we take Fortnite, the more fun we have. So
it's true.
Join us for that. Also, late night panels that happen whenever I feel like staying up late. If I cannot be grumpy the next day, and if I can get enough sleep to go to work. And whoops, stupid mouse is asleep. There's the thing. YouTube and Twitch, I'm on both at DadmanWalking55. Same address for all of them, and on Twitter. And make sure you get DadmanWalking55 with this, because there is an imposter out there that took the G out. So if it's not DadmanWalking55 with this banana, it's not me. So all right. So that note, thank you everybody that's been here. You guys in the chat, if I didn't recognize you personally, I'm sorry. We had limited time tonight, but every one of you matter. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for your comments, your questions. Thank you for lurking. Thank you, Culture Casino, again for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time. Bye, all.